I fought a war for 29 years. I did not know it had already ended. My name is Hiroo Onoda. I am a second lieutenant of the Imperial Japanese Army. I was born on the 19th of March, 1922 in Wakayama, Japan. I am speaking to you now in the 1990s, an old man, living quietly between Brazil and Japan, running a cattle ranch and a school for young people who have forgotten what it means to be strong. But I want to tell you about the jungle. I want to tell you about Lubang Island. I want to tell you about the 29 years I spent fighting a war that the rest of the world had long since buried and moved on from, and about the morning in March 1974 when an old man in civilian clothes walked out of the trees and told me it was over, and about what it felt like to realize that everything I had given my life to, every sacrifice, every loss, every year of sleeping on jungle floor and eating whatever I could find and watching the men beside me die one by one, had been given to something that no longer existed. I was 22 years old when I arrived on Lubang Island on the 26th of December, 1944. I need you to understand what kind of soldier I was before I tell you what happened on that island. Not because I want your admiration, but because the story does not make sense unless you understand the training and the mindset that produced it. I was not an ordinary soldier. I had been selected for intelligence training at the Futamata branch of the Nakano School, the Imperial Army's school for guerrilla warfare and special operations. The training there was unlike anything given to regular infantry. We were taught to think, to survive, to operate alone or in small groups behind enemy lines for extended periods, to use the jungle as a weapon. And we were taught something else, something that would define every choice I made for the next 30 years. We were told that under no circumstances were we to surrender, not ever, not under any conditions. Regular soldiers were permitted, even expected, to die rather than be captured. We were given the opposite instruction. We were told to stay alive, to keep fighting, to outlast everything. My commanding officer, Major Yoshimi Taniguchi, gave me my orders personally before I deployed. He looked at me and he said, "Whatever happens, we will come back for you." I believed him. I believed him for 29 years. Lubang Island sits off the northwestern coast of the Philippines, a small island, heavily forested, with mountains in the interior that drop down to coastal plains and small fishing villages. When the first arrived in December 1944, it was Japanese-held territory. My mission was to lead guerrilla operations on the island, to destroy the airstrip and the harbor pier if Allied forces attempted to land, and to harass and disrupt any enemy presence. There were 4 of us in my unit: Private Yuichi Akatsu, Corporal Shoichi Shimada, Private First Class Kinshichi Kozuka, and me. We were a small force for a large mission, but we were trained. And we were certain, as only very young men who have been trained very well can be certain, that we knew what we were doing. The Allied landing came quickly. By February 1945, American and Filipino forces had taken the island. The Japanese garrison was destroyed or scattered. My unit retreated into the mountains, and then, on the 2nd of September, 1945, in Tokyo Bay, Japan formally surrendered to the Allied forces. I did not know this. For weeks after the surrender, leaflets were dropped over the islands of the Philippines, printed notices telling Japanese soldiers that the war was over, that Emperor Hirohito had called on his people to lay down their arms, that they should come out of hiding and surrender to the nearest American or Philippine authority. The first leaflet we found, in October 1945, read simply, "The war ended on August 15th. Come down from the mountain." We looked at it for a long time, and then we decided it was Allied propaganda. This is the part that people find hardest to understand. How could we not believe it? How could 4 trained soldiers look at a notice telling them the war was over and decide it was a lie? I will try to explain. We had been trained to expect exactly this, psychological operations, propaganda, the enemy telling you things that were not true in order to make you give up without a fight. We had been warned specifically that the enemy might try to convince Japanese soldiers that Japan had surrendered, because making a soldier believe his cause was already lost was the most effective way to defeat him without firing a shot. So, when the leaflets came, we read them through the lens of everything we had been taught. And what we had been taught told us they were fake. We stayed in the jungle. The years that followed are difficult to describe to someone who has not lived anything like them. We survived on what the jungle provided: wild fruits, game. Occasionally, we raided the supplies of local farmers, rice, mostly. We told ourselves this was a military necessity. We told ourselves we were still soldiers conducting operations in a war zone. We built shelters in the mountains. We kept our weapons clean and functional. We maintained military discipline as best we could, keeping records, observing a chain of command, treating our position as an outpost rather than a hiding place. We continued to engage what we believed were enemy forces. There were shootouts with local police and Philippine Army units over the years. People were killed. I did not know at the time that what I was doing was not war, that the men I was fighting were not soldiers of an occupying force but police officers and farmers defending their own country in peacetime. I did not know. That is the truth of it. I did not know. Every year more evidence arrived that the war was over. Search parties came to the island, some sent by the Philippine government, some by the Japanese government, some by my own family. They left newspapers, magazines, letters from my parents and my brothers. One search party in 1959 left a collection of current Japanese newspapers and magazines, publications from a Japan that had rebuilt itself from the ashes of the war and was already becoming an economic power. I picked up one of those newspapers and could not make sense of what I was reading. The Japan described in those pages was unrecognizable to me. A Japan of prosperity and technology and trade with the very countries we had been fighting. A Japan that seemed to have forgotten everything that we had believed in. I told myself the newspapers were fabricated, that the enemy had printed them specifically to deceive us. We stayed in the jungle. In 1949, Akatsu could no longer continue. He slipped away from our unit one day and surrendered to Philippine forces. We considered him a deserter, a coward who had abandoned his duty. On the 7th of May 1954, Shimada was killed in a shootout with a Philippine Army unit that encountered us in the mountains. I held him as he died. We had been together for nearly 10 years. He died believing he was dying for his country, for his emperor, for the mission that had brought us to this island. I buried him and kept fighting. Kozuka and I were alone after that, just the two of us in the jungle for 18 more years. He became, as I wrote in my memoir later, closer to me than a real brother. We knew each other completely, the way you can only know someone when you have shared years of fear and hunger and absolute isolation from the rest of humanity. On the 19th of October, 1972, we were burning rice that local farmers had harvested, a guerrilla tactic, a signal to whatever Japanese forces we still believed might be operating on the island. Local police encountered us. There was a shootout. Kozuka was hit. He died quickly. I was alone. From October 1972 to February 1974, 16 months, I was the only person in my part of the jungle. No one to speak to, no one to share the watch with, no one to confirm that what I was doing still made sense. I kept going, because the orders had not changed, because Major Taniguchi had said they would come back for me, because surrender was not something my training had given me the capacity to consider. On the 20th of February 1974, a young Japanese man walked into my part of the jungle. His name was Norio Suzuki. He was 23 years old, a traveler, an adventurer, someone who had told his friends before leaving Japan that he was going to find three things in the world: Lieutenant Onoda, a panda, and the abominable snowman. In that order, he found me after 4 days of searching. I pointed my rifle at him. He raised his hands and spoke to me in Japanese. He said he had come looking for me. He said people in Japan knew I was here. He said the war was over. I told him I knew what I had been told. I told him I would not surrender without orders from my commanding officer. He sat down across from me in the jungle and we talked for hours. He was not afraid of me, which I found unusual. He spoke about Japan, the Japan of 1974, a country I could barely imagine from his descriptions. He spoke about my family, my brothers, my parents, who had spent 30 years not knowing whether I was alive or dead. I listened. I did not surrender, but I told him if he could bring Major Taniguchi to this island and have him issue me formal orders, I would consider laying down my arms. Suzuki went back to Japan. He found Taniguchi, who had left the army long ago and was working as a bookseller in a small shop. He brought in photographs of me as proof. The Japanese government arranged everything. On the 9th of March, 1974, Major Taniguchi walked out of the trees on Lubang Island. He was old, much older than I remembered him. He was wearing civilian clothes, not a uniform. He looked at me for a long moment, and I could see something in his face that I did not yet have a name for. He read me the official orders. In accordance with Imperial command, all combat activity had ceased. The Special Squadron was relieved of all military duties. We were to stop fighting immediately. Then he looked at me and he said, "I am sorry, Onoda. The war ended in 1945. I stood there in the jungle in my 30-year-old uniform, and I listened to those words. 29 years. I had been fighting for 29 years. Shimada had died for a war that was already over. Kozuka had died for a war that was already over. Every raid, every shootout, every year of sleeping in the jungle and eating what I could find and maintaining discipline and keeping the faith, all of it had been given to something that had ceased to exist before most of it happened." I wept. I am not ashamed to say that. I stood in the jungle on Lubang Island on the 9th of March, 1974, and I wept in a way I had not wept since I was a child. Not for myself, for Shimada, for Kozuka. For the 22-year-old who had arrived on this island certain that he knew what he was doing and what it was for. I surrendered the following day. I presented my rifle, my ammunition, 500 rounds, still functional, my hand grenades, and my sword to the Philippine authorities. I had kept that sword in working condition for 30 years. Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos pardoned me formally for the actions I had taken during what I had believed was war. He returned my sword to me. I appreciated the gesture more than I could express. I returned to Japan on the 12th of March, 1974. 8,000 people came to welcome me at the airport. I stood there in my old uniform and looked at the crowd and tried to understand the country I was looking at, this prosperous, modern, forward-facing Japan that had built itself from the ashes while I was in the jungle. This Japan that had made peace with the nations we had fought and was now trading with them and learning from them and sharing the world with them. I had fought for an idea of Japan that no longer existed. And the Japan that existed instead was, I came to understand, slowly, painfully, better. Not what we had believed in, but better. That was perhaps the hardest thing to accept. I moved to Brazil in April 1975. I needed distance from the attention, and from a Japan that felt foreign to me. I built a cattle ranch in the Brazilian countryside, and I worked with my hands, and I learned slowly to live in peacetime. I married in 1976. Her name was Machi. She was patient with me in ways I did not deserve and did not always understand. In 1984 I came back to Japan and opened a school, Onoda Shizenjuku. A school for young people teaching survival skills, outdoor training, the discipline and resilience that the jungle had given me. If my 30 years in the jungle had produced anything of value, I wanted it to be this: young people who know how to endure, how to keep going, how to find strength in difficulty. I am an old man now. I have had time to think about what those 29 years mean. People ask me, do you regret it? Do you wish you had surrendered earlier? And the honest answer is complicated. I do not regret my loyalty. I do not regret my discipline or my endurance. Those things were real, and they came from something real. What I regret is the cost. The cost to Shimada, who died in 1954 for a war that had ended 9 years before. The cost to Kozuka, who died in 1972 for a war that had ended 27 years before. The cost to the Filipino people on Lubang Island, who lived in fear of two soldiers who did not know they were already living in peacetime. That cost was real, and no amount of loyalty or discipline or endurance can cancel it. Major Taniguchi said, "Whatever happens, we will come back for you." He meant it. He came back. It just took 29 years. I sometimes think about the 22-year-old who stepped off a boat onto Lubang Island in December 1944, certain of his mission and his purpose and the rightness of what he was doing. I understand him. I was in. But I wish someone had found a way to reach him sooner. I wish Shimada had lived to see peacetime. I wish Kozuka had lived to go home. That is what I carry, not the 30 years in the jungle. Not the hunger or the fear or the isolation. The faces of the men who did not come out of it. They deserve to come home.
Hiroo Onoda passed away on the 16th of January, 2014 in Tokyo, Japan. He was 91 years old. He had spent 29 of those years in a jungle, fighting a war that had already ended. He never stopped believing he had done his duty. He is remembered as the last Japanese soldier to surrender, a man whose loyalty outlasted the very cause he was loyal to. Shimada, Kozuka, they never made it home. Onoda did. But some part of him never left that jungle.